everyone, my name is Kelia and I am the teen librarian here at Ashburn Library. Welcome to our final installment of our manga series, which is Isekai Manga. If you don't know what Isekai Manga is, don't worry. And if you want to know about the top 10 favorites we have here at the library, shonen or shoujo manga, please watch our previous videos in the series, but for now we're going to talk about isekai. So, what is isekai? So, isekai manga, I'm pretty sure isekai kind of translates into otherworld. So, in Japanese. So, what it kind of is usually it is somebody from Earth, our world, falling into a fantasy world, or they're falling into maybe like a book they've read, or even a video game. So, it's kind of like somebody falling to a fantasy world with knowledge of, electronics and all that stuff and stuff that they don't have there, and seeing how they impact the world around them in the fantasy world. Or another really common trend in isekai is somebody like dying, usually from a car crash in our world, and reincarnating as somebody that's an already established character in a book they've read. So like they die in our world and they wake up as the main like villainess normally, like in some sort of romance novel, and they have to like defeat their bad ending. So anyway, let's get started talking about 10 isekai that we have here at the library that are great reads. Okay, so the first isekai we have here is Ascendance of a Bookworm. Now, Ascendance of a Bookworm is about this girl. She is a huge bookworm in our world, and she actually dies in an avalanche of like books, which kills her, which is, every librarian's secret fear. You didn't hear that from me. But so she gets reincarnated into a fantasy world as this little girl. I think her name is Aim. It's a weird little name. Mine, M-Y-N-E. I was so close. So pretty much what happens is she reincarnates into this world, and because she's read so many books, she's got like a vast amount of knowledge of things. Like her parents in this fantasy world are not very economically well off, so she teaches them how to make candles out of fat, and she teaches them how to knit and crochet, and she teaches them just how to live a better life through the knowledge she's learned through books in our world. And then inevitably like magic and mayhem and all that stuff come into it. But it's just like a really interesting book, because if you read it, you're gonna generally learn how to do those things, because she kind of explains it in detail. But for me, when I'm reading those parts, I kind of just skip through them because I don't care. But it's cool. It's cool if you're interested. I'm not, I just want to know the story. But anyway, this is called Ascendance of a Bookworm. It's actually a really popular anime right now. So if you don't feel like reading it, you should definitely watch it. But you should also check it out from the library. So next we have the ever popular SAO or Sword Art Online and GGO or Gun Gale Online. I would classify Sword Art Online as an actual isekai, because these characters get trapped in a video game and actually live their lives as video game characters for I think 3 years before they're able to eventually break out. Whereas this one was kind of like a spin-off of this one. So I like this story more, but it's technically not an isekai, it's just her playing her in-character game. Whereas this one, they actually get trapped in the game. So what is SAO about? If you like anime or manga and you don't know about SAO, where have you been? Because it's so popular. They've got like 35 million games, like PS4 games about it, and it's got like 3 or 4 seasons of like an anime. But anyway, so SAO is about Kirito, and he started as a like alpha tester of this game, and when this game came out, he already had several levels, and he started playing the game for real. And then at midnight, the first night the night was released, the creator of the game, who had committed suicide, like appears in the game and is like, you all live here now, and if somebody in the real world takes off your headset, or if something happens in the real world where you're removed from here, you straight up die. So then they have to work their way through like this mythical magical dungeon with like magic and monsters in order to get out of the game. And if they die in the game, they die in real life. So a lot of people kind of like give up and they just live in the game to, survive, but Kirito is one of the people who actually fights his way through the dungeons. So it's really interesting. He meets Asuna, and it just evolves from there. If you like action and fantasy, this is a good one for you. Now we have two super oldies but goodies. We have Arata and we have Tsubasa. So for Arata, it is about a kid named Arata who falls into this fantasy world, and his alter ego that looks exactly like him, who's also named Arata from this fantasy world, falls into our world. So while Arata from our world is exploring the fantasy world Arata is exploring our world. It's a big jumbled mess, but anyway, so the Arata from our world falls into the Hime clan, and it's this clan of kind of think feudal Japan-y people who are guarding the secret, and he of course is the key to unlocking the secret, and it's a sort of dagger that has magical abilities, and of course when he unlocks it, the village gets destroyed and all this stuff happens. And then in our world, Arata from the fantasy world is trying to figure out where he is, what's going on, and he keeps getting glimpses of the fantasy world through his dreams about what's happening over there, and he doesn't understand and he's trying to figure it out. So it's kind of seems like a jumbled mess, but actually it's really good to read. And they stay more into the fantasy world than they do into our world. But people from the real world do find their way into the fantasy world. It's a big old web, but it's fun. Okay, so now Tsubasa. Tsubasa is once again an oldie but goodie, and as you can see, this is number 1, but it's got 3 volumes in it. Tsubasa, if you've ever read Cardcaptor Sakura, is a Clamp. Clamp is their publishing company, so it's a Clamp production, and Clamp does this thing where they kind of reuse their characters. So Cardcaptor Sakura was about a little girl named Sakura, and she had a best friend named Shaoran, and it was this big magical adventure where they found magic kind of tarot cards and they could do things and all that jazz. So as Clamp does, it recycles its characters. So the main characters in Tsubasa are a grown-up Sakura and a grown-up Shaoran who they were maybe in 11 in Sakura, but now they're 16, 17 here. They don't exist in the same universe. So Cardcaptor Sakura does not exist, their world does not exist in Tsubasa. It's just the same character drawing and the same character name. And they generally have the same attitudes and characteristics. But anyway, so a lot of other Clamp characters are reused in here. So if you ever see XXX Holic, you know who Mokona is, you know who the Time Witch is. She's in here because she's a big part of their journey. And the other 2 characters who were part of the main game are original characters for this. But so the whole thing with Tsubasa and why I would classify it as an isekai is because Sakura is the princess of this sand fantasy kingdom, and that's in the desert. And one day something happens and she loses her memory. And so Shaoran is her childhood friend, but also loves her, obviously. And so he says that he'll sacrifice whatever he needs to in order to let her memories back. And her memories scatter and they turn into feathers, but they scatter throughout all these different fantasy realms. So it's not just their world, their sand kingdom that they're in. They go to a world where is kind of like a fairy tale, and it's all white and snow, and it's kind of like a weird snow Sleeping Beauty type of thing. And then they travel to a world where you can summon monsters, and then they travel to a world where there's a dense fog that covers the earth, and there's demons and stuff. So they go from world to world to world, which is why I consider it an isekai, because they're actually traveling places. They're traveling from fantasy world to fantasy world. And they're all really cool and put together in a way that Clamp does their thing. So anyway, Shaoran says that he'll sacrifice anything to help Sakura get her memories back. So they send them to the Time Witch from XXX Holic. And there they meet the other 2 main characters, who then they all go on a journey for their own specific reasons in order to get Sakura's memories back. So I know that seemed like a lot of explanation, but it's a really good, complicated book, and will probably make you cry at times. I definitely had a few teary moments, and it's also just like super action packed. So yeah, there you go. That's Tsubasa, which means wings in Japanese. Tsubasa? Yeah. Anyway, so our next book is my absolute favorite book out of all the isekai books we have here. Well, I don't know, actually, because the next one we have I really like too, but I really like this one, so it's really hard tie for me. I like this one for different reasons. But anyway, the book is That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime. And yes, I know that title is really dumb, and if you play any sort of like video games or anything, you know what a slime is. It's like the lowest of the low monster that you can fight at level 1 to get to level 2, and then level 2 they're too easy and they don't give you enough XP. Right? So this whole book is about Sataru, who renames himself Rimuru, and Rimuru gets reincarnated as a slime, and he's like in this dungeon. So he goes around in the dungeon, kind of just like chilling his life as a slime, going through all this jazz, and then he straight up runs into a dragon, and the dragon's like, hey, if you can break me out of this seal, I'll be your best friend. And Rimuru's like, okay. It's a lot more, like, a lot than that. There's more details, but that's the general gist. And so after he kind of like helps the dragon in a way, but not completely break him out of his seal, he like gets to emerge outside. And then when he emerges outside, like he runs into all these different demons who think they can take him because he's a slime, but he's a powerful dragon slime. So like he's taking on these werewolves, he's taking on these ogres, he's doing this stuff, and somehow he eventually becomes like the king of the forest. It's hilarious and also just so unexpected, and like this book kept me so entertained, and the anime, oh my god, it's so good. It's so good. So anyway, I love That Time I Got Reincarnated as Slime, and I would recommend it for literally everybody. It has something for everybody in it. Okay, so for me, this next one is really close to my favorite. I'm really not sure which one I like better. I like the other one because it's funny and it takes you different places, but I like this one because it's like sophisticated and it's an interesting read, and the story is kind of intense, and that is called Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter. Now this is kind of like the very, very popular, generally like the isekai that you see, especially in manhwa, not just manga. I think this actually might be a manhwa. Manhwa is from Korea and manga is from Japan. But anyway, I could be wrong. I don't want to lie to you. But so anyway, Accomplishments of a Duke's Daughter is, like I said in the beginning, like a general isekai about how this girl, she gets like stabbed, or no, she's hit by a car, which is the cliche, and then she wakes up as the villain character in a dating sim that she played in our world. And if you don't know what a dating sim is, it's like a game that you can play where you can choose different paths and like get different love interests. So she wakes up as the villainess in that game, and she decides that instead of like pursuing the prince, she's going to use her knowledge of our world and her, education that she got from our education system to help her father's fief, because she gets like reincarnated, I guess, as a noble lady. She's going to use her knowledge to help her father's fief not fail, because she gets reincarnated and they're in economic trouble. So I really like this book because like she goes through like all of her thought processes. It's really deep. Of course, there's some romance in there, and like it's just an interesting way to get to the conclusion where she breaks the storyline of the dating sim. And this is kind of like the general isekai that I would be reading. Like this is the type that if I saw on the shelves, I would personally gravitate towards because it's my style. I hope it's yours too. Who knows? But you should definitely try and give it a read. So next we have is probably the most outrageous and ridiculous manga that I have here, which is Overlord. And if you know what Overlord is, you've probably seen the anime. I'm pretty sure that the anime came first. Yeah, it says right here, the manga adaptation of the hit fantasy series. So I'm pretty sure it was either a light novel or it was an anime first, but it is a manga. And let me tell you what this ridiculousness is about. So it's a lot like SAO, where this character from our world, this man from our world, is playing an online game. His name in the fantasy world is Momonga, and Momonga is playing this game, and the game is actually getting shut down. It is the last night that the game is existing, so Momonga decides to play the game until it is fully shut down at midnight. Well, at midnight, it doesn't shut down, and so he's like, what's going on? But then he cannot log off, and so he's like, wait, what? And he essentially becomes his very, very OP character. Momonga is the one right here. He has like a skeleton face, and he's like ridiculously powerful. So then he goes back to like his base, and like all of his minions, which were NPCs, are now real people with like real, you know, attitudes, real characteristics, and everything is super exaggerated, and it's just ridiculous. This one has like a lot of undertones of some stuff, and like it's got a lot of fighting and just absolutely ridiculous comedy. So this one I would kind of recommend for an older teen, but it's just, you need to read it to understand its ridiculousness, but it's also really cool, and the action in it is hilarious. I don't know how to describe it better other than read it, and you might like it, and you might think it's ridiculous. So, Overlord. So our next one is called The Water Dragon's Bride. And so this is kind of a different isekai, where instead of like dying in our world and being reincarnated as somebody who already exists, this little girl falls into like, I think it's like a puddle or a well in the back of her grandma's house, and she wakes up in like a sacred lake where these kind of like feudal tribe age people are like performing a ritual, and they think that she is like a curse from the water god. So like she goes to this village, and these people like kind of don't really want much to do with her, but then the water god is also interested in her, and so she like gets whisked back to the water, and it's her life as a struggle. Eventually she grows up, and she goes through like going back to her world and coming back to this world, and it's like kind of like a romance. It will probably make you tear up a bit because it's very emotional, because, you know, obviously she's a young girl, she misses her family, but it's also like really fantastical because you got the water god, and she can like live and breathe underwater, and it's really neat. So that is The Water Dragon's Bride. I would recommend this for people who just generally like think that's interesting, or like a little bit more like a romancy, serious undertone in their manga. So the very last book we have here is really like the typical isekai, except for more of like a shoujo isekai, because the last one was like this is more of a shonen, and the last one was more like a shoujo, the Duke's Daughter. This one is called My Status as an Assassin Obviously Exceeds the Hero. So in this one, the main character, Akira, his whole like high school class is summoned to this fantasy world, and they're all given fantastical powers, and Akira gets the powers of an assassin, whereas one of his classmates becomes the hero, which is like, you know, the hero of any story, any video game. And Akira, with his, you know, keen assassin like instincts, observes that the fantasy kingdom they've been like brought into is hanky. Like there's something wrong here, and he seems to be the only person who understands. So he uses his very exceedingly powerful assassin skills to like snoop around and poke around, and he discovers some stuff about this kingdom that is not so savory, and in doing so he kind of becomes like a traitor. So then he like has to escape, and the hero is like searching for him, and all this stuff happens, and blah blah blah. But it's very action-packed. Like this book is great for boys who just love action, because it's back-to-back action. There's magic, there's swordsplay, there's a bunch of betrayal and all that jazz. There's some monsters, and it's also like very like an intellectual read. Like there's a lot of dialogue, there's a lot of stuff going on here. There's like a conspiracy, and he's trying to figure it out. So this one is probably one of the best examples of isekai that I have here, along with this one and this one. These are like really the main best isekai sort of examples. But anyway, that is, I can never remember this. My status as an assassin obviously exceeds the hero. Okay, Well, everyone, that is our Isekai Manga video, which means you have come to the end of our manga series here at Loudoun County Public Libraries. I hope you really liked it, and I hope that you know that you can go on our website right now and put a hold on any of these books, any of them. Our website is www.library.loudoun.gov, and I hope that you go and you just really request this manga that is so much fun to read. I don't want to put that library book on my face, but I did. But anyway, so as always, even though this is the end of my series, I am still doing other videos here at the library, and I do work here, so I either hope to see you in my next video or at the library. Bye!